Hi everyone. So my name is Louise, and I'm here from ONH Planning for Good. So today's session is Have Your Say. It's about town and parish councils and the new local plan system. So some of you may know already exactly what system your planning authority is working to, and some of you might not yet have heard. So we're going to talk through the two systems that are currently running alongside each other. So the old local plan system and the new local plan system, and what they mean for you. So the agenda for today is going to cover just a small introduction to ONH, some of the legislative context, the new local plan process, tactical choices and actions for you to make your decisions about how you're going to take part, some practical timeline examples, and further support you can look at if you need help. So just to introduce you to ONH Planning for Good, we're a multidisciplinary social enterprise of RTPI chartered planners, architects and urban designers, including 3 former senior clerks. So we understand planning very well from both the town and parish council point of view and the developer and planning authority side. We've supported more than 250 neighbourhood plan projects for local councils across 65 local planning authority areas, which is probably what we're best known for. But we also deal with local plan representations, major planning representations, settlement spatial plans, design codes, asset reviews, and forward planning services. We embrace a client success approach because we really care about your future, your long-term council goals, and we'll work with you to make sure that you get that. We've got our contact details there. We also have a few common acronyms. So we have the LPA is the Local Planning Authority, LP stands for Local Plan, and NP stands for Neighbourhood Plan. You will get a copy of these slides at the end of the session and hopefully a video as well. So if there's anything you want to go back and look at, don't worry, these will be sent out for you. I'm also going to introduce you next to our 2 speakers. First of all, we're going to have Leah Coney, our Planning and Development Manager. Leah manages a portfolio of town and parish council clients for ONH with a focus on town centre regeneration, asset management, redevelopment and placemaking. Leah also has over 18 years experience of working in local government and significant hands-on experience in the practical day-to-day management and deployment of public-facing projects, working as liaison between the local community and key stakeholders. Right, so I'll hand you over to Leah now.
Thank you, Louise. Good afternoon, everybody. Next slide, please. Ala Chris Whitty. Thank you. So a quick recap from our last webinar. We are a plan-led system in England. What does this mean? Well, to start with, it means you really need to have a plan to benefit from the system. So the local plan sits along with any neighbourhood plan or minerals and waste plan to form the local development framework for the area and sets the strategy for housing, employment, infrastructure, climate action, design, nature, heritage, and identifies sites and policies against which the planning applications will generally be determined. Decisions will be made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So why does it matter now? Well, it's always mattered, but the new 30-month process means fewer repeat consultations and tighter windows, and that brings with it opportunity and risk. So the new system is intended to make local plan preparation faster, clearer and more structured. But of course, shorter and clearer processes also mean that you need to be ready to respond at the right time. So the Groundhog Day that we've had previously of repeated Reg 18 consultations over a number of years is now no more, and you'll need to be alive to how and when to respond, otherwise you may well miss the window of opportunity. So for town and parish councils, the important point is that you are not simply observers in this process. You are now statutory consultees, which means local planning authorities are expected to involve you at key stages. So you should be expecting direct notification. You should understand the stages at which you can comment and be ready to use those opportunities to comment. And this will give you a formal route to influence the future of your area. However, influence depends on engagement. So if councils respond early, clearly, and with evidence, they can help shape those local development priorities, policies, and potentially land allocations. If those opportunities are missed, it may become much harder to influence the plan later on. Next slide, please. So let's look at the relevant frameworks. So a quick history lesson for those of you that don't necessarily find enjoyment thumbing through your Charles Arnold Baker in quieter moments. For local plans, the primary legislation is the Planning Compulsory Purchase Act 2004. This requires local planning authorities to prepare plans, identify strategic priorities, and includes policies to address them. It also provides for examination and adoption. 2023, we then saw another piece of primary legislation, Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, or as known colloquially, LURA, which has reshaped that statutory framework for the new plan making system. The detailed procedure behind that has now been put in place by secondary legislation through the Town and Country Planning Local Planning Regs 2026, which have been enforced since the end of March. And they provide the operational detail to what was in the LURA. So they set out timetable, form, content of plans, details on consultation, notification, adoption, mapping, and transitional arrangements. Importantly, for the audience today, parish councils are identified as statutory consultees under Regulation 2, and that's set out for you on the slide. Leonie will talk through the regulations in the coming slides. Next slide, please. So hopefully you're sitting comfortably. We are now officially in transition. We have two local plan making systems operating in parallel, the so-called legacy system, which we're all familiar with, which has the Reg 18, Reg 19 consultations, which sit within that framework. And now alongside that, we have the new 30-month local plan making system. So this allows plans that are already advanced under the old regime to reach examination and adoption, whilst authorities that can't meet that deadline move on to the new route. The crucial rule is that an authority must follow one system from start to finish, so it cannot carry out, for example, a legacy Regulation 18 and then jump across the tracks into the new system at Gateway 1. What it can do, confusingly, is progress a legacy plan and a new 30-month local plan at the same time. So just be aware of that. Confusingly as well, both systems also include a Reg 19 stage. In the legacy system, that's towards the end. In the new system, very much at the beginning, even though they obviously sit within different statutory processes. So Leonie will take you through those regulations, but suffice to say, we just need to be explicit about which system is being referred to at any given time. So today's focus is on the new 30-month local plan system, but just a reminder for those of you whose LPAs are operating under the legacy system, the submission deadline for examination is 31st of December. So if you have not been through a Reg 19, this will happen over the next 3 months. Please make sure you do submit a response to that so that you are included as part of the examination process afterwards. If you don't respond at the Reg 19, there is no automatic right to be included as part of the examination. The transitional provisions in the regulations cover when local plan preparation is required to commence, but an authority can start on the new system as soon as they wish, hence why we have some that are on a twin track. We know there's places like Central Beds, Cheshire East, who have already decided to start under the new process already. And the regulations set out backstop dates by which certain authorities are required to start plan making. But all authorities are required to publish notice to commence plan making when their existing local plan is 4 years and 8 months old, and to publish their Gateway 1 self-assessment the day after the plan reaches 5 years old. Please do not assume that if your local planning authority's local development scheme says that they will be submitting by December this year, don't necessarily take for granted that that is still the case. At the end of last year, we had over 150 local authorities whose published timetables said this. About a third have already dropped out, and as the countdown clock ticks, there are likely to be more that withdraw from that legacy process if they feel they're not going to get to the deadline in time. Next slide, please. So I've looked at the legislative framework. Let's now look at the policy framework. We say draft NPPF, who knows, it might be published this week. But we know that new draft NPPF, which obviously supplies national planning policy, states that local plans must be prepared with regard to it, and they are tested for legal compliance and soundness at examination. Your new local plan should be sylph-like or attractively slender in appearance, should be more focused. So the new national decision-making policies in the NPPF will cover those more generic development management issues. So local plans should have a tight focus on local priorities, local allocations and delivery. Within new local plans, there should be up to 10 measurable outcomes, no more than that. And the strategy should cover at least 15 years from date of adoption. So matters such as infrastructure, affordable housing, developer contributions, land allocations will be expected to be seen within that. Allocations generally will be more standardised. There should be fewer local policies because there should be no repetition of what's in the new NPPF. Development management policies should only be included where there is a clear justified local need for them. So they are nuanced away from the more generic policies in the NPPF. And site-specific policies will support the delivery of allocations. Importantly, and new plans should now be published in a searchable digital format. Evidence should be proportionate and make use of existing reliable information. So there should not be the kind of weighty tomes or multiple volumes of plain pitch strategies and whatever in the local plan now. It should be proportionate and focused. Plans can consider things like flood risk, water, overheating, biodiversity, green infrastructure, landscape, and local design policies where they are genuinely necessary by adding local detail. So the overall message there is that local plans should be shorter, more spatially and delivery focused, the emphasis being on having a clear vision with measurable outcomes, deliverable allocations for housing, infrastructure with site-specific requirements, and more limited but locally justified policies. I'm now going to hand over to Liani, who's going to take you through the detail of the new local plan process. Thank you.
So just to introduce Liani, she's ONH's planning director. Liani Haim is a chartered planner with experience across local government and private practice. Leveraging her diverse background and professional qualifications, she guides clients nationwide to secure better community outcomes from new development and empowers them to navigate the planning system with more confidence.
Thank you, Louise. Louise has been doing a grand job trying to keep these slides from running away from us. So thank you. I don't know if it was mentioned earlier either. If there's time at the end, we'll have a question and answer session. In the meantime, do pop your questions into the chat function. If there's no time at the end, or if you think of them. So what I'm going to do is just quickly run you through the process. I've tried to make it engaging as possible. I'm not going to read through the regulations, and as you can see on the slide there, there are some regulations in between these kind of larger steps. But if you really want to know exactly each step that the local authority needs to undertake, absolutely go and have a look at the regulations. These are just the key points that I think are important for town and parish councils to know about. So as Leah mentioned, slimlining is the aim here. The hope that from government is that this is going to address, some of the long-standing problems from the existing local plan system. There were all sorts of ambiguity in interpreting some of the regulations in the old system. And I'm sure some of you will have seen the appeal to the courts in relation to the Oxford City local plan. Now, our observation of these new regulations is that there appears to be less wiggle room. It is a simple process. It's fairly easy to just see what the steps are when you look at the regulation. But as ever, it's been overcomplicated because an enormous amount of guidance has been published that just appears to make it more complicated than it actually is. So we've tried to simplify it, hence I've only pulled out some of the regulations. So the first thing you can see on the slide there is the timetable. So the slide, which I'll have a copy with afterwards, will tell you which regulations that relate to. And there's a little short summary of what each step involves. So the key for you, as Leah will take you through further in the next section, is when you see that timetable being published. This is essentially when town and parish councils need to sit up and get your affairs in order, so to speak. And that's because the step that follows is the first formal chance to engage. So that's the scoping consultation, guided by Regulation 20. As part of all of that guidance I mentioned they published, remarkably, there's no template for scoping consultation. And each authority from the ones that we have seen that are published seems to be interpreting the scope differently. So we've had consultations that are really brief, and then we've had consultations that are really, detailed. Now, to us, a minimum of 21 days consultation suggests it should be brief, but there's no template in the guidance. The guidance does, however, commit to publishing a template local plan later on. They're working on that behind the scenes. But anyway, this is the first step that's really important for town and parish councils, and Leah's going to tell you what you need to do in terms of responding to that. But no, when you see a scoping consultation guided by Regulation 20, that's your opportunity to say something. The next step is what was called Gateway 1, and that is essentially just a self-assessment that the local planning authority is going to carry out. You can kind of read exactly what that will entail on the slide afterwards, but essentially the local authority self-assesses its progress. It carries out some checks and balances to make sure that these first few steps that has been undertaken appropriately. Next slide, please, Lou. The next step is a publication. So it's not an engagement process, but the local authority has to publish a summary of that scoping consultation that I highlighted earlier. So what's important about that for town and parish councils is if you commented in the scoping consultation, this is your opportunity to make sure that those comments have been noted and they've been taken into account. Because that summary should also show how the local authority has had regards to what people have said. So it's an opportunity for you to analyse and review what has been published and to get yourself ready for the next consultation, which is the content consultation that's guided by Regulation 23. Again, we're not really sure what that's going to look like, but we're guessing it's going to be a straw man of a draft plan. Of course, as Leah mentioned, because of the changes coming to the NPPF, they've got to be shorter. So hopefully that means no more reading 400-page documents for all of you, but we don't know yet. So for those who've done maybe neighbourhood plans, it's almost like consulting on your draft policy ideas, we think. It might include site options to choose from. Ultimately, we can't say how it can't include site options, but if it's going to hit the next stage and have something meaningful to show, and that kind of longer consultation period that the regulations require, which is a minimum of 6 weeks, kind of indicates to us that it really ought to be something meaty. But of course, only time will tell. And then the next publication is guided by Regulation 24, very similar to Regulation 22. So take a note of those summaries that are published so that you're ready to raise any matters again at the next stage if they've not been addressed in that summary that's been published. So next slide, please, Lou. Then we get to Gateway 2. Now, Gateway 1 was, of course, a self-assessment by the local authority. Gateway 2 is where somebody that's been appointed by the planning inspectorate now gets involved. So someone from the planning inspectorate is going to have a look at these summaries that's been published, and they're going to provide the local authority with a guidance. So either, yes, you've done your checks and balances well, yes, you've progressed well, or these are the recommendations of what we have that you need to do next if you want to be successful at the next steps. And again, they have to publish that report, and so it's an opportunity for town and parish councils just to review what that report says, and prepare for the next step, which is the proposed plan consultation. And that's guided by Regulation 27 to 30, and that is the first kind of proper consultation on the draft plan. So that should also include the summary of the consultations and how the plan has responded to them. So a lot less wiggle room, we think, but we'll see how these things play out. The next step is Gateway 3, which is really important, because at this point, if the local authority hasn't got it all right, the assessor can require them to go back one step and undertake that proposed plan consultation again. But assuming that they're not, we go on to the next slide, which is eventually, after all those checks and balances, they're ready to submit, and it includes a further set of notification obligations, so that they have to inform town and parish councils that they're submitting. There are also several points during that process where you can request to be notified. Town and parish councils or anybody responding can be requested to be notified, and Leah's going to clarify those practical steps for you in a moment. After submission, we head to examination, which is guided by Regulation 35, and this includes hearings, it could include modifications, it could include further consultations, but the idea is, because there's been these three gateways beforehand, it should just be a simple process. That's the hope, because the local authority has already been provided with an opportunity to deal with issues. But nonetheless, in case something goes wrong, the regulations do make provision for another opportunity for things to be delayed at this point. But it makes it very clear that this should be no longer than 6 months. So that's, for example, if further work is necessary. And then finally, assuming all of those things have been successful, there's the adoption at the end. I think what's really important here is once that plan is adopted and published, like Leah said, in a digital searchable format, the other thing that local authorities will be required to do is publish a full policies map. And what they mean by that is not just the local plan, all development plan policies. So that includes neighbourhood plans and minerals and waste. So that has to be done at the end of this process, so that there is one place where people can go to see which policies out of the development plan, even though they're made up of several different documents, applies in a place. And that's it on the process. So Leah's going to take you through some tactical choices and actions you can undertake to take part in that process, before I return in a minute with a kind of example timeline.
Thank you, Leonie. So what tools do you have in your box? It is highly likely that your local planning authority planning policy team does not know your parish in the same way that you do. So as such, we often recommend to councils that where hard choices have to be made, particularly around things like site allocations, consider using a settlement spatial plan as a first step. So this is so that before you start thinking about how you respond to the emerging local plan, you can understand spatially the sustainable limits of development for your area, and what would need to happen if you wanted to move beyond those current limits in terms of infrastructure, roads, transport, access, movement, green infrastructure, biodiversity, community facilities, and indeed how you may want to respond to climate change pressures. You can then make tactical choices then as whether you want to manage the narrative yourselves through the neighbourhood plan, or whether you want to use that information to shape your response to the emerging local plan. If it's the former, depending on your individual circumstances, the response is going to vary. So if you've got a made neighbourhood plan that you can modify relatively quickly, you can seek to include site allocations, engage with the LPA at that Reg 20 stage. Do not assume that they will know that you're modifying your neighbourhood plan. It could be the neighbourhood plan officer might be on a different part of the planning policy team. So explicitly state that that's what you are doing. This is particularly relevant if you're in an area that started their emerging local plan under the legacy system and has now abandoned it. You know that restoring that plan-led system has to be a short-term goal for the neighbourhood plan, because the local plan is not going to be able to do this for some considerable time. So the neighbourhood plan is going to need to step in and do that job if you're minded to do that. If you're bringing forward a new neighbourhood plan, again, stating it through the Reg 20 so the local plan can account for it. There is absolutely no point in you pouring all your time and energy in if the LPA doesn't know and starts to seek to allocate in your area anyway. But through responding at that Reg 20 stage, there's a marker set down already that the local plan can be clear that the neighbourhood plan is taking responsibility for those allocations so that they don't have to. So you're effectively doing their work for them. You might decide that actually, neighbourhood plan isn't necessarily for you. You're comfortable using the engagement opportunities to proactively respond to the local plan and providing that local definition to the plan by giving them the evidence that you've got. I think if you're an ALC on the call today, I think these Reg 20 opportunities are there for you to help support town and parish councils, particularly if the Reg 20 is silent on either neighbourhood plans or indeed wider town and parish council involvement. Next slide, please. So this is all good, but just a few things to be aware of. The local plan regs do not specify how neighbourhood plans fit within this new system. Neighbourhood plans remain on their own statutory track under the Neighbourhood Planning Regulations 2012 by town and parish councils or obviously designated neighbourhood forums. The fact that town and parish councils and neighbourhood forums are now statutory consultees recognises them, but the system is reliant upon you being proactive at the outset of the emerging local plan to state your intentions. And I'm sure NALC probably are or will be lobbying for clarity on this for the sector. Next, AI risk. Summaries of local plan reps. Spoiler alert, AI can miss the point of your rep. So do check when summaries are published. Government is looking at a consultation summary tool. There is a local plan focused pilot, but it's not a standard national platform. Some local authorities are already publishing summaries of consultations under the legacy system using AI. There is one area that, is probably not too far from here, where we've got a number of town and parish council clients where that AI generated response has lost any sense of individuality. It is incredibly generic and it's not meaningful. So just watch out that things are not being missed. Finally, site assessment quality control issues. This goes back to the your parish better than anyone. Digital tools are incredibly helpful, but there is a risk that new local plans are not likely to be much better than the old ones in terms of being just driven by numbers and looking at the fewest of the least worst options in terms of site allocations. Going back to what we said about settlement spatial plans, don't let this happen If in doubt, resource, prepare and evidence yourselves so that you can put that evidence forward for the local plan to explain if you think the approach is wrong, why it's wrong, and what the right approach is. Next slide, please. So just in summary, use Regulation 20 to set out your direction as it pertains to your area so you can influence what happens. Make sure you stay updated. If you haven't heard anything for a while, do ask. Coordinate with your CALC and or NALC for advocacy for the sector and clearer guidance on the role for neighbourhood plans within this new local plan system. Continue to use neighbourhood plans as leverage for short-term control to restore that plan-led system quickly in your area, but also for longer-term planning. The new NPPF has kept neighbourhood plans there for a reason. They are still the most powerful tool in your box because they are part of the development plan. Finally, maximise your use of the local plan process. Unlike the legacy system, there is now an earlier path to challenge at Gateway 2 rather than just at examination. So well-timed evidence and being clear of your intentions and requests can influence decisions that are made, particularly around allocations. I think that's it from me. So back to Liani. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. So on the next slide, what I've done is probably won't, if we could have the next slide, Lee, I probably won't read through it. But essentially what I've done is just use an example local plan timetable at the top. In the middle, you can see if you were to bring forward an enabled plan, those are the kind of steps that you would follow to align yourself with the local plan timetable. And if you were to commission O&H to help you with a settlement spatial plan and you're not taking it through a neighbourhood plan, that's what you would do. Now, some caveats when you look at this later. This is how it can work. This is not how it has to work. It's just an example of how you can align your projects so that they work together. On the next few slides, what I've done is I just looked at some data that I had lying around in terms of who's on the legacy system and who's on the new system, and just dropped it in here for you to go and have a look later at your area. I haven't covered all of the areas of everybody on the call. I've only covered those areas where we had the highest attendance. So you won't find everything on there. But as you can see, I think there was a question in the chat about where Buckinghamshire is. Well, Buckinghamshire is following the legacy system. They are not following the new system. And to date, we've not heard any rumblings that they're going to pull out. So they have to submit that before the 31st of December. Incidentally, for those Buckinghamshire town and parish councils on the call, we are having another webinar of this nature about the Buckinghamshire local plan for you that you can sign up to if you haven't yet. So Milton Keynes on there as well, and then West Northamptonshire, North Northamptonshire. So the example I used on the previous slide, that was the North Northamptonshire timetable that I used, just because it was, one that was already published. And what I've done is I've just inserted a link to the new timetable if the local authority is following the new local plan system that we've taken you through today. On the next slide, we've got the Oxfordshire Association of Local Councils, Local Authorities, and you'll see there's an example there, South Oxfordshire and the Vale. Looks like they're going to be following a twin track. So they've got their legacy local plan making running at the moment, where examination hearings are taking place, and they're anticipating adoption May next year. But then also, a notice to commence the next local plan under the new local plan process at the same time. So I'm sure those officers are not having any holidays over the next year. I also just wanted to let you know, for those of you that are facing local government reorganisation, so where your local authorities are moving to, unitary authority tiers. Just last week, for those councils that are, kicking it down the line. So I think again there was a comment about I think it was Lichfield's district council, postponing it to next year. Well, the government has said that is not a reason to delay plan making. Those are their words that I put on the slide there. This is the case even if you will not be able to progress the plan to adoption before the new unitary authority is operational. So they go as far to say that they will publish transitional regulations to deal with that. Now, I don't know what's going to happen to them if they don't do what they're told. Put on the naughty step, who knows? But there is a clear mandate from central government that they want local authorities to do this. And just because you're not going to be able to see it through till the end is not a good enough reason not to start it. And so on the next slide, there's Lichfields. So they should be going on the new local plan system, but I suspect that link to information will provide an updated position, and of course the others as well. So it is difficult, because just because that's how something should be done doesn't mean that that's always what ends up being done. So, for example, Tamworth is committing to a August Reg 19. Well, that has to be submitted before the 31st of December. Is that plausible? I don't know. I think Tandridge District Council has published a Regulation 18, under the legacy local plan system, which is odd because how can they achieve that submission before 31st of December if they're only now starting at the very early stages of the legacy plan making system? So it is all confusing, but what you've heard today is how technically it should work, and of course watch this space in terms of what central government may or may not do to those local authorities who are not undertaking their plan making. Thank you, Lou. Lou's going to just take you through some further support we can offer in this respect, and then we will hit some questions.
So of course, ONH will continue to run webinars on a semi-regular basis. If you go to our website and sign up to our emails, you will be notified when we have an event like this coming up. We do try and do them at least twice a year. I think there will be 3 this year. We're planning the next one will be possibly October. Date not quite decided yet, to give you an update as you go into the next planning for your next year.
Oh, sorry, Lou. No one's pausing.
It's all right. There we go. And of course, you can contact us as well. We are planning consultants. We can help you with whatever you need, basically. If you get in touch, tell us what your problem is. We'll see what we can do. And if you are our client, we do try and give additional notifications and tailored support to help you through these things. We've mentioned earlier there is a number of official guidance and roadmaps documents online that the government have produced. These are being regularly updated. From our point of view, we'd say that there is so much here. It would be near impossible for a busy town or parish council to read it all. We don't really recommend you do that. There's lots of helpful summaries around. And then if you really wanted to know the detail on a specific area, perhaps it would be useful to go and look at just that particular area. Finally, we'll go back to AI. We gave you a warning earlier, which is that sometimes it doesn't work as well as you want. ONH have been working for the last 18 months on developing our own AI specifically because of that. We felt that general AIs don't understand planning very well, and they certainly don't understand town and parish council planning, which is its own thing, really. So if that is something that you're interested in, if you do find that that might be a useful tool for you, it can do really helpful things. Certainly our version is a closed model AI that's designed to give you confidence that the answers you're getting are just based on relevant legislation, your own local plan, your own neighbourhood plan, and advice from ONH. Don't forget, if you are going to use AI, that there is guidance from the Planning Inspectorate about that. So we strongly recommend you have any work that you produce using AI health checked by a qualified professional before you submit it as part of the local plan process, and the same for planning applications too. So ONH Planning Advanced is available through GovAssist. If you know Cloudy IT, it's their AI platform. Just to give you, there's some details here if you want to go and have a look at it. But to give you a little example, I was in Campbell Park the other week in Milton Keynes. So I put in a question that said, Milton Keynes' plan is at examination stage. Campbell Park are concerned about the impact of healthcare facilities through the new growth in the parish. How would this relate to the potential soundness of the new Milton Keynes local plan? And what ONH Planning Advanced Assistant does is it gives you really specific, helpful advice. It will refer to specific policies. So I've asked it about the draft NPPF because we're expecting that to be made very, very soon. PM15 in there gives key guidelines about local plan policies, that they have to be positive, appropriate, realistic, consistent, and in conformity where relevant. So when it comes to healthcare, the key test is realistic. Is it going to be realistic or not? Again, you get a really helpful breakdown of what the policy includes, what some other policies that are in the plan might be relevant, and it gives you some advice about how you can check whether it is going to be realistic, because at the moment from the draft plan, it doesn't demonstrate clearly what extra healthcare capacity is needed, where it will go, how it will be funded, when it will be delivered, and whether the relevant NHS bodies support that approach. So that's just a very quick, simple example to show you the kind of answer that you can get and how useful that might be if you're thinking about writing a local plan response about a specific issue. And you can then use that after you've finished your draft to just be checked over by someone before you submit it. I'm going to stop sharing now so we can have everyone on screen. Thank you, everybody, for coming along. We have given you lots and lots of information in this session, and I know you've got lots of questions, and we have about just under 20 minutes to answer some of these questions. So let's have a look at these. Okay. I assume that when you refer to parish council, this also includes parish meetings. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
No.
Oh, sorry. Correction from Leah there.
Yes, but no.
Yes, but no.
So yeah, parish meetings absolutely are consultees in the process. They are not statutory consultees. That is town and parish councils and neighbourhood forums only. As far as I'm aware, parish meetings are consultees in the process as part of the community, but because they are not elected or formally don't have sort of duties and powers, I don't believe that they are considered to be statutories in the process, unless someone corrects me otherwise.
Okay, next we have Wiltshire local plan has just been withdrawn. Our extant local plan is the Wiltshire Core Strategy 2015. We are on the new process but cannot meet the within 5-year requirement for Gateway 1. Is this covered in transition?
So the new local plan process that they will follow, what I've seen is the government is also providing grants to local authorities to undertake local plan making. And one or two examples I've seen, for example, Wokingham Borough Council, instead of following the timeline that the regulations have set out, they've agreed, because they're accessing funds from government, a slightly different timeline. So I don't know if that's the case with Wiltshire. It might be, but yes, Wiltshire will probably have to follow the new local plan process, which incidentally, the regulations say should only take 30 months. but we'll see.
So another comment here, Bucks are about to launch Regulation 19 next week. Yep, hopefully.
They are, and as I said earlier, they are committed to submitting their local plan for examination by the 31st of December. Watch this space. We're just looking for some more questions.
Quick question, will slides be available to you afterwards? Yes, they will, absolutely. Hopefully a video as well, if we can sort that out. We have a completed neighbourhood plan, but it has not been adopted or made because one individual has called for a judicial review of one minor matter in the plan. How frustrating for you. Will our neighbourhood plan be considered by the planning authority if it has not been made?
So I've answered in the chat there that yes, there's 2 specific paragraphs in the NPPF that you're going to want to familiarise yourself with. And at the moment, it's paragraph 49 and 50. That might change next week, but you're essentially looking for it. The NPPF makes provision for weight to be attached to a plan that's not yet made, but it's gone through the process. And there's just a few tests that you've got to demonstrate why you've come to the conclusion that yes, there's weight and this is the amount of weight it can carry. And then paragraph 50 is on prematurity. So not allowing something in case it is premature and the neighbourhood plan hasn't had a chance to have its say on it. Now, those provisions are anticipated to be retained in the next version of the NPPF, which we're expecting next week, fingers crossed. So we'll see, but yes, there are those provisions there that you can have a look at.
How are we expected to engage with our LPA to provide evidence, and how will this be accepted/ignored? From James Hughes. I mean, I think probably the first thing to say is that there aren't standard consultation templates at the moment. And therefore, while this might cause a little bit of frustration, in other ways, it gives you an opportunity to do what you will most want to do or would most helpfully be able to do, which is to try and arrive with the problem solved for them. If you can identify what they're trying to, the issue they're trying to solve in your area in the local plan, you might have a better way of doing that. So focus on what's the solution that we think is the right solution.
Yes, and that might be, as Leah said, through a settlement spatial plan. So that's where you look at growth scenarios and figure out what the best strategy is for you. Or it could be something really simple like we don't want to prepare a neighbourhood plan because we just want to designate this space as a local green space. Local plan, can you please do that for us? And in that case, all you would do is here's the evidence to show that that local green space meets the tests. Can you just put in there for us, please, local authority? You would like to think that something as simple as that they would take on, but yes, I take the point. But this new process does allow more than one place for you to remind them of that and query why it wasn't done. And certainly their regulations require the local authority to explain themselves.
Can I pick up, there's been a couple regarding Lichfield, not an area that I particularly know well, but so there's a question saying they're not looking to adopt their new local plan until 2029. Yep, that would be about right on the new 30-month process. You know, if they're starting it this year, realistically it is going to be 2029 before it is adopted. I think there was a follow-up question saying Lichfield has cited significantly increased housing targets as a reason for postponing completion of a plan and the desire to now explore new options like a new settlement. As they don't have a 5-year land supply, presumably this means there will be a lot of sites committed before the new plan is in place. Yep, absolutely. So Lichfield will not be the first or last local authority to put the blame firmly back on the new standard method figures in terms of saying that they just cannot meet those housing targets, and that's the reason for delay. I don't think it would be inappropriate to mention for colleagues on the call at Cheshire, at Cheshire West, who their local authority has been very vocal about the increase in housing number, which, went up significantly I think they went from having a 9-year housing land supply to something like 2 point something in literally overnight. For those parishes that we're working with in that area, they've recognised exactly what you've said. There will be a load of sites coming forward, all these speculative applications coming in whilst you've got that policy vacuum. So a number of those communities are taking responsibility and stepping up and using their modified neighbourhood plans to do that. And are allocating significant numbers. We're talking, 600-800 in some areas, making sure that they have exceeded that indicative number, because they know the community doesn't, nobody wants that much development, but they would rather manage it, shape it, and get the community benefits that they want. I think there was another comment from someone about, S106 is being used up for particular contributions like education and roads and infrastructure, and how does this all work? Yeah, that's the stark reality now, is that local authorities do not have the funding. They are relying more and more on development to pay for these things, and communities that don't get involved in that process and don't manage and help shape the growth that they're getting, have less control over how that money is spent and where it goes, because you can write them into your policies. Your allocation policies can say, this allocation for 800 homes is coming forward, but as part of that, it has to deliver a one-form entry primary school. That's part of the policy. That goes way back to slide number 1. We're a plan-led system. The default position should be, if something is in general conformity with the policy or the allocation wording as written in a plan, that should be acceptable. So yeah, I suppose it's just to say, yes, we're aware of that. And I think, that's where neighbourhood plans certainly over the last couple of years have been able to react in a very agile way, because they can progress so much quicker. We're whizzing plans through the system at the moment, to restore that plan-led system, and to stop those speculative applications for the wrong growth in the wrong places. It's not community saying we're anti-growth, it's just we don't want growth there. We actually would accept growth here, and so long as it delivers those benefits. So lecture over, but good luck to those that are in Lichfield.
A comment from a parish in Suffolk. Given local government reorganisation in Suffolk, our LPA could be abolished. Will the work on the new local plan automatically carry over to the new authority? And then I think from the rest of your comment, it sounds like it's a bit messy and you're not sure exactly what's going to happen with reorganisation. There are quite a few people on this call who've been through local government reorganisation already, so they've already moved to unitary authority. Our experience in these places is that if the local plan is fairly well developed, the likelihood is that the new unitary authority will just keep working on it and finish it off. If it's less well developed, or there's some particular problem with it, there's a chance that they would stop working on it and instead move over to doing a plan for the wider area instead. I think in most of the cases we've seen, they have kept working.
If it's far enough in the process, yeah, there's just no way of knowing, and it's down to the new council to decide whether they're going to continue carry that on, or abandon it and replace it with a new one. But yeah, that's generally what happens, but as you've explained.
And to go back to Leah's point, if in any way the situation in your area seems a bit messy, think about what you can do as a town and parish to take some of that control back. Is there anything that you can do in the meantime, so that you aren't reliant on them being able to do particular things? And people's sort of mileage to do that will be different, but absolutely can be used.
Probably go down to what success rates have parish council had in seeking to take on responsibility for site allocation? Well, it depends where you are in the country and your local authority is. unfortunately. There are those that are really supportive of neighbourhood planning and they want neighbourhood plans to do it. There are those that can see the value and the resources that town and parish councils are saving them in doing the work. And then there are others that just pretend they don't exist. And so in those cases, the latter cases, some of our clients have had to just continue fighting, I suppose is the word, to get heard, taking part in all of these formal processes, and in some cases have been successful, and in other cases have not. But normally they've decided to just continue with their neighbourhood plan anyway, because it normally delivers a lot more than what the least worst sites that local plans normally deliver. Provides community. So normally in a neighbourhood plan, there's a real tangible, community benefit that's being pursued. So it does swing in roundabouts, and it does depend where you are. It does depend on your context.
So if you're in Buckinghamshire, Mel from BM Calc has helpfully added some links for you so you can look at those documents that we talked about earlier. There's some questions here about unadopted estates and leasehold, and whether the NPPF does anything to address this specifically. I'm not sure that it does.
Not really. It's
not a plan.
No, it's a model that has become increasingly popular. I think it's a difficult one. I'm going to say something that's probably quite controversial, but sometimes, and I understand the double taxation issue, that if you are already paying your precept and you're paying again, but I suppose at the end of the day, as we know from those that were under 3-tier authority, people don't necessarily care who cuts the grass so long as it's cut. And if the responsibility goes to the district council, the borough council, the town or parish council, it is likely that you might have to increase your precept to cover that anyway. So I get it, but it's difficult to fight against, to be honest. So yeah.
Because otherwise you end up with those kind of things.
Absolutely. I think there's a question here from Robert Taylor. We're close to 3 other LPAs within 5 miles, each developing their own local plans, with 3 other large sites under the call for sites very nearby. How can we influence the other LPAs to coordinate? Well, welcome to settlement spatial planning. Welcome also to the fact that the duty to cooperate is no longer with us, but government is obviously, government recognises this, and SDSs, which is probably a call for another day to talk about how those regional development plans will be coming in over the next couple of years that will address those cross-boundary issues. However, in the short term, yes, this is exactly what the settlement spatial plan work does, because we know that development does not stop at the red line boundary of your parish or your local plan's boundary, particularly where there are a number of either local authorities or town or parish councils within an area that is ripe for development. So those settlement spatial plans are there to do exactly that job, that you can then pass to the LPA. I said we're back to you're doing their job for them. If you've got the resource to do it, why not? And just to show how those sites influence, or what the functional relationship is between those sites and those areas and your parish, and how that can influence. We know particularly with small parishes that have got big SUEs on their doorstep, and urban extensions, which also go cross boundary, that they can be very impactful. But actually, if you just read a local plan, a narrow local plan from one authority, it almost ignores what's happening with those. So that's what we do with settlement spatial plan work, is just to make sure we consider everything in the round.
Just one final thing before we sign off. I just want to be very clear that those settlement spatial plans are It's a concept we came up with. So it's one of ONH's products, and it's an exercise to help you do all the things that we described. It doesn't carry any weight at the end, other than the evidence you gathered you can use. That's why we said earlier on in the slides, you can then decide how you want to use it. You can either use it as evidence to respond to a local plan or planning applications, or you can take it through a neighbourhood plan, and that's how you get it to carry significant weight as part of the development plan. But it is a great exercise. We're happy to provide clients who've been through it to talk to you about it if you're interested. But I think that's it.
Just to say, we absolutely have clients who've done that cross county boundaries as well, because that's the reality of some places. They are close to a county boundary, they're close to different planning authorities, and people don't live entirely within their planning authority. That's not how life works. Wonderful. So thank you very much to everyone for attending. We will be sending the slides out afterwards. Thank you for your brilliant questions, and thank you to my co-hosts for delivering this today. We will send out details about the next session as soon as we've got that in the diary. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.